Good afternoon. I hope you're staying cool in a very hot COP. We've prepared for a fireside chat to make it even a little hotter. Luckily, we don't have a fire, but we certainly have fire in our hearts at the moment. My name is Anna Lehmann. I'm Global Policy Director with Wildlife Works, and also Wildlife Works is a founding member of the People's Forests Partnership. The People's Forests Partnership is hosting this panel here tonight. We are a membership-based organization that brings together representatives from indigenous and local communities and companies as a safe space to learn about the market, to learn about standards, to learn about contracting, to learn about, biodiversity credits, carbon credits. What is this all? Do I want to get involved? Yes or no? That's the space that the People's Forest Partnership occupies. I'm really thrilled today to invite you to a panel. You see two empty chairs here. We have our dear Francisca Arara, a member of the PFP, and also Secretary for Indigenous People of the state of Pará in Brazil. She has just been called into a meeting with her minister, Minister Sonia. Minister Sonia is the first female indigenous woman as a minister of Indigenous People in Brazil, and it is indeed a historic moment for us, not only having her in that position, but also President Lula had to fly away, so he handed over the delegation to her. So she is leading the Brazilian delegation. The Brazilian delegation is led by an indigenous woman right now. The negotiations here in Abu Dhabi, sorry, last year at COP28. But we're trying to drag her out, and that's what the two chairs are for her and the translator. We don't have live translation at the AITA Pavilion. We love AITA very much as a space for conversations between businesses. And we want to recognize also that, indigenous people are rising up the ranks. Francisca is one of those examples, and certainly Sonia. But also here, our dear friend Gustavo Sanchez, who is a director at the Mesoamerican Alliance of Peoples and Forests, based out of Mexico. And so we want to bring, as the PFP, we want to bring in those community and indigenous voices into the negotiation space, into the conversation with businesses. So welcome to that. And that is the fire, the fire in our hearts really is for those communities occupying these spaces now and being here. We still have to work on translation in the AITA Pavilion, so this is why we have live translation going on here. And I hope, we turn this into a bit of a good flow. Right, with that, just to explain to you a bit the composition of what we're doing and accommodating here to the translation situation. We'll invite Francisca when she gets here, and of course Gustavo, to reflect on a conversation that we started at the People's Forest Partnership, where we wanted to hear from our members what are their, current concerns that they see when they get contacted by project developers, by standards, what are their needs, what information gaps do they identify. And last year we hosted a panel where Lucia was on the panel already for our trees, and we started a conversation there around getting feedback and listening from standards. How do they take that feedback on board? What do they do with it? So I'm really happy for this to be a follow-up conversation. And there they are.
Hola, Francisca.
Hola, Francisca. Por favor. Please meet Francisca Arara, Secretary of Indigenous People of the state of Pará. So nobody had chance to get brief. but la traducción, the translation, we'll try if you could. So we just go with this. Right, so it's the follow-up from the conversation from last year, hearing from indigenous groups. Then we hear from two standards over there, and then Colin Moore, a project developer, who's going to give us a little bit of a reality check on project development from his perspective. But with that, I would like to start with a brief round of introductions, and for Gustavo to introduce himself and his work at AMPB, and what he sees as priorities, the asks that he gets from his communities when it comes to carbon project development.
Bueno, soy Gustavo Sánchez de México y soy presidente de una red de organizaciones comunitarias forestales que agrupa tanto a pueblos indígenas como comunidades locales.
So I'm going to translate Gustavo Sanchez. He's the president of a network in Mexico of local communities and indigenous peoples that have forest territories.
Formamos parte de una plataforma que se llama Alianza Mesoamericana de Pueblos y Bosques, que agrupa a 10 organizaciones de 6 países entre México y Panamá.
They're part of a broader platform called the Mesoamerican Alliance for Peoples and Forests, which brings together members from 10 different organizations in 6 countries spanning Mexico to Panama.
Creo que en general todas las comunidades esperan más acciones, más resultados de estas cumbres climáticas y no solo los mismos resultados o discursos desalentadores.
In general, all the communities want to see more action and more results coming out of these global conferences and not the same outcomes that are somewhat disappointing.
Muchos de nuestros compañeros nos preguntan cuando regresamos de un evento como este, ¿qué resultados concretos hay para las comunidades más allá de ofrecimientos que luego quedan en el aire?
Many of our partners, when we come back from these meetings, ask us what were the tangible, what were the concrete results.
Estamos tratando en esta COP de proponer acciones, de hacer anuncios de pasos importantes.
At this COP, we're trying to demonstrate results and make announcements of important steps forward.
Y me da mucho gusto estar en un auditorio de gente del ámbito de negocios, porque muchas veces estamos dialogando solo en cámaras de eco.
And I'm pleased to be here in a meeting room that brings together people from the private sector, because too often we're speaking in an echo chamber.
Muchas veces somos los mismos actores, pero reunidos en países diferentes o en contextos diferentes, y es bueno que haya un diálogo multisectorial y multiactor.
Okay. Too often we're different people meeting together in different spaces in different countries, and it's really important that there's a multi-stakeholder dialogue.
Voy a compartir el micrófono con mi compañera Francisca.
So I'll now share the mic with Francisca.
Boa tarde a todos e a todas.
Hello everyone, so she's saying good afternoon to all.
Queria aqui agradecer a presença das mulheres, dos meus colegas aqui da COICA, aqui da mesa.
And she's also saying thanks to the indigenous women present, the partners, and also to the roundtable present here.
Queria falar para vocês que se hoje existe floresta no mundo, graças à nossa luta das populações tradicionais que nós, até hoje, a gente tem preservado a floresta para que a gente ainda esteja aqui.
And so she's saying that if there are forests today, it's due to the fight that indigenous people and traditional communities have been having this fight for all these years, so that forest is available for us to use today and to be present here.
O nosso território tem sido uma barreira para frear o desmatamento e as queimadas.
So their territories have been a barrier to stop deforestation and to stop fires, forest fires.
E é muito importante que esses recursos, seja eles, né, de doações ou de empresas, projetos privados, que seja alinhado, sério, venha de fato chegar, porque a gente também precisa preservar, mas nós também precisamos sobreviver.
And so she's saying that it's very important that resources that's available from private funds or from projects that are nested, that these resources actually arrive at the territories, because they need these resources to not only survive but also thrive.
Nós precisamos de água potável, nós precisamos de uma segurança alimentar de qualidade, sem agrotóxicos, sem veneno.
So they need potable water, they need food security, so they need quality food without pesticides.
Nós precisamos ter uma estratégia justa de repartição de benefício.
So they also need a just benefit sharing mechanism in place also.
Eu acho que muitas vezes a nossa fala ela também precisa sair do discurso, porque nós já estamos em muitas COPs, né, conversando e a gente precisa dar uma solução urgente, porque a gente está vivendo outro momento de seca no Brasil, na Amazônia.
And so she's saying that the moment now is to leave only the discussion space and to move into action. So she's saying that we have discussed this a lot. And now Brazil is facing one other event of droughts, serious droughts in Brazil, all of Brazil, especially the Amazon.
Por incrível que pareça, aquelas onde tem mais floresta, onde a gente achava que não ia sofrer as consequências, 5 terras indígenas no estado do Acre foram atingidas com essa seca do El Niño.
And so despite what we imagine, places that have a lot of forests and a lot of rivers are the ones being most affected by it. So she's saying that 5 territories in the Acre state have been seriously affected by these droughts and also fires.
E eles estavam solicitando água potável, segurança alimentar, apoio, e não tinha quem apoiasse, não tem dinheiro.
And she's saying that these people that were suffering by it, they were requesting for potable water, they were requesting for food, and there were no one to help them. They didn't receive the support.
E é um momento que todos os seres vivos, mexeu com todos os seres da terra, até os insetos estavam atacando as pessoas.
And she's saying that this has affected all of the living beings there in the forest. So she's saying that insects started actually attacking people. So this has brought a disruption to the whole ecosystem.
Então, os fundos climáticos não precisa ser mais uma raiz de burocracia que não venha chegar de fato para quem realmente preserva as florestas, que somos nós, os povos indígenas.
And so she's saying that these climate funds can't be one other step to bureaucracy. She's saying that these resources, they actually need to go to indigenous people who are the ones protecting the forests.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. Let's continue a round of introductions just to hear from everybody, meet the panel. If you could just introduce yourself, your name, what you do, in which organization, Lucia, and then we start from that side on. If you could, we have another mic now as well. If you could just, yeah.
Hi, yes, I am Lucia Madrid. I work with the Architecture for RAD Plus Transactions, so ART, which is a carbon program, and we have the TREES standard to certify jurisdictional RAD Plus programs. And I work with stakeholder engagement and with policy, governments, and indigenous organizations and others that are our partners in this journey.
Hi, I am Julia Sunderland. I thank you for organizing this, and thank you, Gustavo and Francisca. I am part of the team that is working to get Equitable Earth off the ground and set up for success in its mission. And the mission is to unlock private sector capital to flow and reach and enable the indigenous peoples and the local communities at the forefront of deforestation. So we believe strongly that deforestation is an economic problem, and only a fraction of climate finance is currently reaching where it needs to reach. And so our goal is to change that and to make sure that the communities are enabled to be spending the funds, whether it is on stewarding and protecting the forests and the diversity, and as well the self-determined sustainable development goals. So it's nice to be here.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colin Moore. I work for the Wildlife Conservation Society as the Regional Carbon Advisor in the Mekong region. For those that don't know, the Wildlife Conservation Society is a global conservation organization. We work in over about 60 different countries in some of the highest biodiversity, highest value landscapes that remain. These are often landscapes that are under threat. They are also landscapes that contain large numbers of local communities, indigenous people. So a lot of our work, we take a very human rights-centric approach to our conservation. So we work very closely with those local communities and indigenous people. A lot of my role is specifically on the Keosema Red Project in Cambodia. This is a project that's been operating since 2010 under the VCS and CCB standards. In the region, WCS is looking to expand its footprint of red projects, and so part of my role is about making that link from our landscapes to the markets.
Wonderful, fantastic. So I understand Francisca had to go to another meeting, but is possibly coming back. We're just keeping our fingers crossed here and going with the flow. What I find really fascinating at this panel is, so Gustavo, in his function for his organization, he works with membership organizations. They're in conversation with jurisdictional standards, art trees, as well as with Vera, with other standards, so project standards. A lot going on. Francisca, in her role working for the government of Para, is in conversation also with the Leaf Coalition and art trees. And I was, I was kind of keen to hear from their perspective on, how are things going? What has changed over the last 12 months? What's the development that they see happening? And then I'm very pleased to see, we have, with our trees, the jurisdictional standard here, as well as with Julia, a nested project standard. So those two then sort of responding to the views. Thank you.
Muchas gracias por la pregunta, Ana. Yo creo que entre Sharm el Sheikh y Dubái, en términos de la discusión y construcción de una política de mercados de carbono que nos funcione a todos, han pasado, desde mi punto de vista, tres cosas fundamentales. Perdón.
Can I use this? Yeah. So thank you for the question, Anna. From the last COP to this one, as we look at the policy environment for carbon finance, I think three important things have happened.
Me parece que ha habido un serio cuestionamiento a los mercados voluntarios de carbono, a su credibilidad en diferentes ámbitos. Ese es el primer punto.
So there's clearly been some serious questions raised about the carbon markets and their credibility and their integrity. Their credibility.
El segundo punto es que se ha llevado a cabo la primera transacción de red jurisdiccional en Guyana con un volumen bastante considerable de dinero, lo cual es algo muy importante por el potencial que tiene.
Second, the first jurisdictional red transaction has taken place in Guyana with a considerable flow of resources around that.
Y el tercer punto es que tenemos un anuncio 2 semanas antes del inicio de la COP de que las contribuciones nacionalmente determinadas no están pudiendo detener el calentamiento.
We also had an announcement 2 weeks before this COP that the NDCs weren't meeting the goals that would allow for climate change to be controlled.
Entonces, es imperativo que tengamos acciones más rápido y a una mayor escala, pero también con un contenido fuerte en el tema de respetar derechos.
So it's imperative that we have action at greater scale with more speed, but also with attention to respecting rights.
En ese sentido, con muchos de los actores que están aquí presentes, estamos en esta COP anunciando algunos avances importantes.
So with many of the actors present here today, we're announcing important progress on that.
Por ejemplo, mañana vamos a tener el anuncio de una propuesta de mecanismo de financiamiento por parte de varias organizaciones en Latinoamérica y el Caribe.
So for example, tomorrow we'll be making an important announcement about a new financial mechanism with various organizations from Latin America and the Caribbean.
El día 6 vamos a anunciar los avances que tenemos con una certificación adicional con ART3.
And on the 6th we'll be announcing or describing progress on an additional certification under ART3s.
Y ayer con Julia y varios amigos anunciamos este nuevo estándar de tierra equitativa o Equitable Earth.
And yesterday with Julia and other friends we announced the launch of this new standard, Equitable Earth.
Entonces, esta articulación en People Forest Partnership entre empresas, ONGs y organizaciones es muy poderosa porque nos permite empujar todos estos procesos.
So this articulation under the People's Forest Partnership between companies, community organizations and NGOs is really important to move these processes forward.
Entonces, Ana, estos son algunas de las cuestiones que nosotros creemos que han pasado, que han cambiado de un año a la fecha y algunas de las respuestas que estamos tratando de tener.
So Anna, these are some of the things that we've seen evolve over the last year and some of the progress we were seeing.
Wonderful. Wow, you have been busy. There's a lot going on. Brilliant. I would say welcome back, Francisca, but let's give you a moment to breathe and to settle into the conversation. And I would like to pass over, Lucia, to you from our conversation that we started last year, and I know, of course, you had started that at ART3s way earlier, thinking about really how to operationalize safeguards with the jurisdictional standard, large scales, large landscapes, to work on lots of different actors. Tell us, how's this work been going, and what is progress from your side over the last 12 months?
Great. No, thank you. I think Gustavo already touched two really important points relating to us. He already said that the first jurisdictional credits were issued and put into the market, which were Guyana credits. Those were TRIS credits, certified under our standard. And then this other topic that Gustavo already touched is we started working with a group of organizations of indigenous peoples and local communities to develop one of the modules of our new certification of REDCO benefits. We've been hearing for a long time from indigenous peoples that for them, RED programs and RED initiatives cannot only bring climate benefits. They're expecting more from those. They expect RED programs to, of course, bring economic, social benefits to the communities. Also, they want to benefit from those the policies and the strategies that are being developed to reduce deforestation and forest degradation. Those policies should, at the same time, strengthen the territorial governance, strengthen the framework of rights of indigenous peoples, and have other types of impacts. At the same time, the buyers of carbon credits are asking for the same thing. They say, I don't want only a carbon credit. I want to know if that carbon credit or the initiative that was developed to actually generate those credits, what else happened with that initiative? We want to see that those initiatives are having other benefits, because we're talking about, in jurisdictional RED, we're talking about big government efforts that have taken many years. Some of the countries we come from have been preparing their RED initiatives for 15 years, doing their national RED strategies, building a monitoring, reporting, and verification system. Those countries, 15 years ago, maybe they didn't even know how much deforestation they had. So RED has helped build all of this, but it's a lot of effort, and we want, like, buyers, suppliers, and indigenous communities want to see that that effort is benefiting beyond the climate, it's benefiting people, biodiversity, and the environment. And that's why we are working with this group. We're working in this co-benefit certification that will have 3 modules: biodiversity, other forest environmental benefits, and social and cultural benefits. And I just have to say that we have here some of our partners. Red Mocaf, that's where Gustavo is part of the committee that is developing it. ANECAP, they are an association of indigenous natural reserves in Peru. They're also our partners in this. Aisha just left, but she's from Cameroon, and Repaleac is the Congo Basin indigenous organization. She's also one of our partners. And we're working with COYABI, that is the organization of indigenous peoples in the Amazon in Brazil. So working with them, and we hope we will have that ready to be used in the next months.
Fantastic. I've also been really busy. Interesting to hear about this co-benefit certification element. We're certainly keen to look into that or understand it better. Thank you. Great update. Julia, let's go over that way. Tell us more about Equitable Earth. What is your vision of the space that you would like to occupy? How do you see yourself slotting into this ecosystem?
So Equitable Earth is, as you know, a little bit the new kid on the block. We are a coalition at this point, and the founding members of the coalition who have been really investing a lot from the beginning include Forest Trends and Wildlife Works and Everland. And we're currently working to grow the coalition and really take the next step of development. Clearly, well, what we are building is a new forest carbon standard and platform. And in order to do that, we are preparing to launch an independent global operating company with the base of leadership in the Global South and with indigenous people, local communities at the heart of the organization and the leadership. So you can think of us as on this journey. At the same time, there is, as Gustavo and Francisca was saying, there is real urgency. And so we're working to move extremely fast. And we've been doing a lot of work building actually on the principles of the People's Forest Partnership to develop this first pass, of the standard and the methodology and the registry and the tools, all the pieces that need to come together for what we're trying to achieve. And so we're now just at the period where we are wanting to really engage a little bit more broadly from there. The way we think about it is on the supply side, first and foremost, indigenous people and local community are at the heart of everything that we do. And so we are working to partner very closely and make sure that this is a standard that is only issuing and certifying credits for community-led forest conservation projects that are protecting the interests of the communities on the ground and in the front lines. We are also working at a very senior level with Global South governments, which, if you saw the launch event yesterday, was very powerful to hear Minister Sonia Guajajara from Brazil speaking to the goals of what her ministry is working to do, and also hearing from the Minister of Environment, Minister Yves Badzaiba of the DRC, and the importance of an equitable solution where the finance is reaching the forest communities, to how she sees the scaling working in the DRC as well. So that is really what is guiding us on the supply side. And then clearly on the demand side, we only have a market, and we can only unlock private sector capital at scale if we restore trust and really meet the buyer needs. And so what we're building is a standard and a platform that will issue and certify high-quality forest carbon credits. And these are forest carbon credits that will reflect the full impact of a project that the carbon funding is working to enable. So that is the full impact, which means the carbon impact with robust carbon accounting and nesting, as well as the biodiversity impact, as well as the social and economic development impact. Because the opportunity here is the things that Francisca was naming. The communities have a huge number of social and economic development needs that range from building schools to building health clinics to ensuring clean water to job creation to agricultural development. And all of this impact needs to be, we need breakthrough transparency so that the credits can be understood not just as a checkbox on these things, but with real granular reporting of that impact. So that's what we're working to do. We think about transparency on 3 dimensions. There's money flow transparency. So how much of the money is reaching country, how much of the money is reaching community, and how is the community deciding to invest that money. All of that should be transparent. And secondly, the project management transparency. So how is the project being run is really at the core of restoring trust. And so transparency of how free, prior, and informed consent is working on that project, and transparency of the leadership roles, the decision-making of that project, and transparency of the grievance mechanisms and the ongoing governance for the project. So we really think about the money flow transparency, the project management transparency, and then the measurable impact transparency that I was talking about.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julia. It's certainly a good time for new standards. We see a lot of innovation in the space happening. And interesting, you threw us the word nesting. And we understand from our trees they have nesting options. So in a jurisdictional program, you can nest projects. Equitable Earth is a nested project standard. That's fascinating. Colin, you're one of those people who will have to make this work. Your project is, it's in Cambodia. Cambodia has a national program as well of sorts. Well, tell us about your journey, you know, of being a project developer and bottom-up nesting into something bigger, and how that could look like, and what are the sort of pitfalls that you might have come across.
Okay, so I mean, Cambodia has 3 active VCS projects, and the government has taken its strategy, its RED strategy, is to promote projects. They believe in the project-based approach. They understand the need for good partnerships with high-quality partners in their attempt to reduce deforestation in key landscapes in key areas. These projects now, and the success of them, means that Cambodia is the third or fourth country in the voluntary carbon markets in terms of numbers of RED credits issued. And the government has decided to approve other projects. There are more projects now that are in development, in going through feasibility stages. Now, of course, that opens up questions around the projects, their accounting, and how does that align with national accounting as well. And this is something that, of course, has been recognized in the standards, for example, even in the VCS, and we have the new consolidated methods that has been issued. Cambodia will be one of the first countries that has national data sets developed, and therefore projects able to then use the consolidated method and nest at that jurisdictional level with jurisdictional accounting. So that's one element of the build out of a jurisdictional program as it relates to the accounting. There are then the components of broader program management of a national program. And the Cambodian government has for a few years now been going through a process of trying to identify what its guidelines are and how to formalize those in a regulatory document called the Prakas in Cambodia. This would articulate, the requirements for project developers, who they need to be, what standards you can or cannot use, some guidance on benefit sharing, and a few other components. I would say that this is probably what we can consider one of the lightest versions of a jurisdictional program. And I think that's okay, because it also reflects what the capacity is in Cambodia and the ability of the government to manage such a program. So it's not going down the route of, a strongly centralized jurisdictional program. It recognizes the need to incentivize partners, incentivize projects, and allow them to also transact directly with buyers. So that's a bit of the vision and the runway. But I wouldn't say it's been an easy process. This journey of building out a national RED program, we also have to consider that this is being viewed at the government level also through the lens of how does this contribute to our broader NDCs, our broader strategies in achieving those NDCs. And in countries like Cambodia, where forestry and the land use sector is by far the largest sector where the country will be able to achieve its NDC, it's important to get this right. But it's complicated. How do you build out this national jurisdictional program? How does it align with our NDCs? Will we be able to make Article 6 transactions off of this? So it's a complicated space. There's not necessarily a lot of donor support at this point to build these things out. And so with only a patchwork of projects, of potentially small donor funding, it starts, it stops, it starts and stops. And knowing that we want to build out jurisdictional programs, we want to improve the integrity of these programs, it's sometimes challenging in that kind of context of insufficient funding for the true build-out of the next phase of RED readiness.
Wonderful. Thank you, Colin. I'd like to echo that from our members at the PFP. We hear that, get that message as well. It is confusing if you're a community in a territory, one company comes, talks about one standard, one way to go about, the other one, talks about something else. Attracting all sources of finance at a territory level or at a national level is a complex conversation to get right. I would be interested to hear from Francisca's perspective in this regard as a representative of her community, but also as a representative of the government of Para in conversation with under the LEAF program as well as under our trees, but also any other comment you would like to make. Please share with us experiences or just perspective to give us a little bit of flavor of the type of conversations that you're in, and what your views are, what your recommendations are.
Então, o Estado do Acre, entre 2009 e 2010, a gente construiu programa jurisdicional.
So she's saying that between 2009 and 2010, Acre State has built this jurisdictional RED program.
Por que a gente pensou programa jurisdicional naquele momento? O governo chamou a gente para conversar e nós tivemos muitas dúvidas, com o projeto de RED+.
And so she's saying the question why did we think about having this jurisdictional program created? And she's saying that the government asked them to dialogue about this, and they had a lot of questions about RED Plus projects.
Como pensar RED+, se as terras indígenas não desmatam, se elas têm o estoque, não o fluxo, Nós temos o estoque.
And so how would they think about indigenous territories? They have forest conservation. They are not being deforested. So how this would work for them?
E aí foi por isso que a gente construiu o programa jurisdicional, que a gente acredita que ele não é o melhor, mas o programa jurisdicional ele foi construído com muitas mãos, inclusive com instituição internacional, com todos esses cuidados de não violar direito, de não violar os territórios, que os programas e projetos não venham a chegar também só para o assistencialismo.
And so she's saying that they decided to choose the jurisdictional RED program in this context, that they have a lot of questions, and they know that the jurisdictional RED program is not the best, but they thought it was the best at the case because it is involving many hands in the construction of this project, and also involving international institutions and having these safeguards consideration for rights. And and that these projects would not only be in an assistantialism way, so that would bring real results to them.
Então, aí a gente criou a lei do CISA, que a lei do CISA, quando a gente foi olhar o ARTRIS, muitas coisas a lei do CISA já complementa, os padrões, as regras, os princípios. Então, com essa discussão com o LIF, a gente foi adequando alguns pontos.
And so she's saying that in Acre State, they have a policy implemented for payment for environmental services, ecosystem services, and that the RED was complementary to the politics that they have already established there. So there was a dialogue between the RED implementation and this this law that they have in place for environmental payment services, which is called CISA.
Porque o programa, a lei, ela é estadual. E o programa jurisdicional, o projeto é outra coisa, que é o primeiro projeto que a gente acessou foi o programa REN.
And so she's saying that this law is at the state level and that RED is at the jurisdictional level. And she's saying that the project is at another level and that the project that they had was a REM, RED Early Movers.
E quando chegou o projeto, porque tinha o programa, a lei, aí quando chegou o projeto, a gente teve essa preocupação também na estratégia de repartição de benefícios, que não foi uma discussão muito clara.
And so she's saying that they already had this jurisdictional discussion, they had the law implemented, and then when the project arrived, they were very attentive to the discussion regarding benefit sharing.
E o programa REM, ele é pagamento por resultado, ele não é compra de crédito.
And so she's saying that the RAM project, Red Early Movers, it's a project that is payment by results, so it's not a credit buying.
E a discussão com o LIF, aí sim, é negociação, é compra e crédito de carbono. O Estado vende e as empresas pagam. E aí é onde é outro problema, né, que a gente está discutindo.
And so she's saying that this is different to the red context in which the government discusses with LEAF for the selling of credit. So this is another problem that they have to figure out how these negotiations will work.
Porque o Acre tem a autonomia, a lei própria, o princípio, a governança, as câmaras temáticas, como a indígena de mulher e a SEVA.
And so she's saying that the context in Acre State is that they have this governance. They have, for example, thematic cameras for discussion in the political level. They have a thematic camera for women, indigenous, and other topics for discussions.
E aí a discussão que 14% do território acreano é terra indígena e 90% de carbono é as terras indígenas também que acumula.
And so she's saying that 14% of Acre State is covered by indigenous territories, but 90% of all carbon is contained within indigenous territories.
Então, houve essa discussão de tratativa entre o Estado e as câmaras temáticas muito preocupadas para ter esse entendimento. E a gente levou o pessoal do LIF até o Acre.
And so she's saying that they were in this discussion, the thematic cameras and also LEAF, they were having these discussions, and they were able to bring LEAF representatives to Acre State.
E aí eles explicaram para a gente que é toda uma conversa, né, de tratativa, porque é tudo um passo a passo, não é chegar e fechar os contratos, porque precisa ver, porque a violação ela não está só nos territórios, mas será que o Estado vai ser violado? Como é que vai ser o fluxo? Quais são os riscos?
And so she's saying that when they arrived to Acre State and they were able to meet, LEAF explained that this was a step-by-step process, that you can't just arrive and sign a contract. So you have to do this step-by-step in order to secure the rights. So,
e o nosso procurador ele está acompanhando, que é o procurador da PGE do Estado do Acre, e chegamos no entendimento que hoje a gente vai assinar uma folha de termo para dar a continuidade do processo.
And so she's saying that the prosecutor for the state, they are in dialogue with them, and they are going to sign
folha de termo, que é para a continuidade da conversa, né, com o LIF.
And so, term sheet. Okay. So they are going to sign a term sheet to the continuing of the dialogue.
E aí a gente tem que fazer aquele dever de casa, que é ir para a caneta pensar a discussão, o entendimento e principalmente a estratégia de repartição, melhorar o mecanismo de estratégia de repartição de benefícios, porque o do REM já não serve mais.
And so she's saying that now they need to do their homework in order to determine how they want the project to be implemented. So they are very focused on having an improvement of the benefit sharing process that exists, because she's saying that the benefit sharing mechanism that's in place, that came from RAM project, it's not aligned anymore with their needs. It needs to be updated.
E é um dever de casa, sim, que a gente vai ainda precisar fazer, né? Hoje o Estado do Acre vai assinar essa folha de termo que ele falou, né? Mas é um processo da continuidade. A gente entende que ainda não seria já para pegar o dinheiro, né? Porque já há outra preocupação, mas o trabalho da Câmara Temática, a formação, a informação, no dia a dia precisa acontecer, independentemente de se tem dinheiro ou não, né? É uma coisa contínua.
And so she's saying that this homework they will need to do still, and this is going to be a process. So even though it's not going to be something that the money is already available, it's going to be still a process for this. It's very important to have these definitions so that when this money arrives, they're able to have this implemented for.
E programa jurisdicional, o programa de rede, projeto privado em terra pública no Brasil ainda não está regulado. E a gente está numa discussão com a Forestrand, com o MPI, porque a gente precisa ter esse entendimento, porque são duas coisas, né? O programa jurisdicional, que não anula o privado, se for de boa-fé, porque tem muitas empresas que estão usando de má-fé, mas ainda no Brasil não é regulamentado, e terra indígena é terra pública.
Okay, and she's saying that in Brazil, the situation that we have is that RED projects, they are not regulated yet. We have a regulation in process, and she's saying that they are in dialogue with, for example, with forest trends to better have these definitions, because the implementation of RED, it doesn't annul, for example, private projects, so the voluntary carbon projects. So this needs to be discussed, the implementation of both of them.
É um caminho andado, que a gente precisa do apoio, né, das instituições, das empresas sérias, porque tem empresas e empresas, mas tem empresa muito séria ainda, e a gente é um processo que a gente está discutindo com os estados, com o governo federal, com as empresas, com as instituições parceiras, para não ser a ideia só de um.
And so she's saying that it's very important having partners being a part of it, having partners supporting it, and being in partnerships with very serious organizations that are actually focused on having this implementation done right. And so this is a process, and it needs to be done by lots of hands. And so she's saying thanks.
A nossa terra ela vai muito além de ativo, nada paga, por isso que a gente tem que ter muito cuidado.
And so she's saying that indigenous territories, they go way beyond carbon credits and other assets. And other assets. So we need to be very mindful of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, what a wealth of... there was a lot in there to unpack. We're not gonna run out of time, but I sort of hope we have it recorded somewhere. I also noticed a glitch in the translation, because obviously from Portuguese to Spanish, that might have not quite worked out. But Portuñol, okay, fine. Oh, okay, it worked out, great. But I was fascinated to actually hear, so they've got experience with the RED Plus Early Mover Program. It's ODA, finance, payment for performance, then comes jurisdictional, then comes the project, is figuring this all out. And in that space, thank you, Francisco, for coming. Elsie. Sí, claro. Te veo más tarde. Thank you, Melissa. This was fantastic. Yeah, so figuring this all out is complicated. And which are the moments where communities need to get in, and what to negotiate, and how to get their safeguards right, and all of that complicated process. I wonder, Gustavo, if you also have a perspective on this that you would like to share. And then I would also like to open the floor for questions in a good Aita manner. I'm sure there's people who would like to contribute. We have another 30 minutes, so we have a little bit of time. But let's hear from Gustavo first.
Bueno, yo creo que el escenario que nos compartió Francisca es algo muy aproximado a lo que se está viviendo o se está por vivir en todos los territorios.
The scenario that Francisca described is quite similar to something that we're seeing in all of the different territories.
Donde vamos a tener conviviendo iniciativas red jurisdiccional, proyectos individuales y la cooperación, ya sea de la filantropía o de subsidios gubernamentales. Entonces necesitamos ver el financiamiento climático en todos sus ámbitos.
So it's a scenario where we're going to see jurisdictional level approaches, project-based activities, and public finance all coexisting.
La intención que tenemos de plantear mecanismos de financiamiento desde pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales es que se consideren las diferentes fuentes de financiamiento y no solo la clásica, que es las donaciones de la filantropía.
So when we think about climate finance for indigenous peoples and local communities, we don't want to see it limited just to the classic model of aid finance and donations.
En México, por ejemplo, somos el segundo país del mundo en recibir remesas, es decir, envíos de dinero de nuestros compañeros migrantes.
So in Mexico, for example, we are the second largest country in terms of remittances received from Mexican migrants living overseas.
En este momento, esas remesas que envían nuestros hermanos y hermanas que han tenido que emigrar representan más ingresos que los del petróleo en México, que los ingresos por extracción y venta de petróleo.
Currently, these remittances from our brothers and sisters who have had to emigrate are greater in value than the income derived from hydrocarbons, from oil and gas.
Estamos explorando la posibilidad de encontrar mecanismos de ahorro comunitario que permitan financiar proyectos en el territorio donde son los migrantes.
We're trying to develop mechanisms, community savings mechanisms that allow projects to be developed in the territories. ¿De dónde origen los migrantes?
Sí.
In the territories where the migrants have left.
Esto es un ejemplo de una fuente de financiamiento que poco se considera, probablemente no en todos los países sea significativa, pero es un ejemplo de que tenemos que tener la apertura para considerar diferentes fuentes de financiamiento y no solo una.
This is an example of a kind of financing that's been overlooked, and it may not be applicable in all circumstances, but it's an example of the kind of thinking about alternative sources of financing that we need to have.
Hay una cierta tendencia de que por la especialización que estamos trabajando solo vemos mercados o solo vemos donativos o solo vemos proyectos con apoyo gubernamental, pero lo importante es cómo hacemos sinergia entre todos estos recursos.
There's a trend, depending on where we're coming from, to either look only for market-based finance, for public finance, or for aid, and we've got to look beyond that and try to find synergies between those different kinds of finance.
Bueno, ahí dejaría yo mis comentarios.
We'll leave the comments there for now.
Muchas gracias, Gustavo. Amazing to hear, and that it is Trade Day today at the COP, to hear about those innovative ways of thinking when it comes to thinking of ways to reallocate wealth from the square offices in the cities and the big towers to the green spaces, to communities, to those that look after nature, and where we need to create the jobs to keep this planet and humanity alive. I would like to open the floor for questions, but also, you know, if panelists feel inspired from this conversation to just chime in, then I would say grab a microphone or raise your hand if you would like to ask a question, because I'm sure we have a couple. I saw the one in the back popping up immediately. I think that's our floating microphone. We'll use that one.
Hi, Arif from Indonesia. So my question to Julia is that I'm curious about the thinking behind the idea of creating a new standard for the community-led carbon project rather than, strengthening the existing ones. And my question, I guess, is that what gaps from the existing standard you want to fill in, and why you don't think about, filling in that gap in the existing standard through their channel of, feedback or, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Look, the way we see it, we started very much with what problem are we here to solve, right? And I think we see two challenges, two problems out there, and one problem is around what I was talking earlier. Deforestation is an economic problem, and the money is not reaching the communities, and it needs to, and we're running out of time. And the second challenge is the one Gustavo mentioned around the current crisis that the VCM is in from an erosion of trust. And so we want to make sure that as we think about our goal, which I think is a shared goal, to unlock private sector capital to get where it's needed as fast as it's needed, we want to make sure, I think we believe there's a time right now where we need more solutions, not less. And we think that the market needs to be 20, 50 times bigger than it is right now. And we can't do that alone as Equitable Earth, but we need to all work together, and we need more solutions on the table. And so we're just trying to make sure that there is a solution that is really shifting the emphasis and prioritizing first and foremost the needs of the forest communities and the global South countries. And then, of course, in turn, also making sure that it is working for the market. And so we're coming from that standpoint.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julia. I would say let's move on to the next question.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vincent Haller. I'm a Master of Environmental Science candidate from the Yale School of the Environment. I was wondering if, I'm interested in both perspectives, Gustavo's perspective and also Julia's and Lucia's perspective on this. And I was wondering about the benefits of having both approaches, JRED and project-based RED, in countries compared to the scenario just with JRED or just individual projects. If you see the benefits of a combination, a nested approach. Gustavo, soy de Chile, así que puedo también darte directamente la pregunta. La pregunta es, ¿cuáles son los beneficios de tener proyectos JRED jurisdiccionales y proyectos individuales en combinación? ¿Cómo ves tú que esos beneficios existen para las comunidades y para reducir la deforestación? Thank you.
Bueno, yo creo que son ámbitos distintos los que aborda los proyectos o las iniciativas jurisdiccionales y los proyectos individuales. Me parece que en el caso de los proyectos de las iniciativas jurisdiccionales, la intención es crear acuerdos entre gobierno, empresas, comunidades, y tiene el potencial de incidir de una manera más amplia, es decir, en modificar incluso políticas públicas. Cuando en México empezamos a discutir la iniciativa RED, que finalmente la actual administración decidió no firmar un acuerdo con el Banco Mundial, a pesar de que no llegamos a hacerlo, pudimos modificar la ley forestal para incluir el concepto de salvaguardas sociales y ambientales. Entonces, es un ejemplo del ámbito que puede tener la cuestión jurisdiccional.
And you can fact check me.
Buena pregunta.
Sorry, I'm going to do bad translation from Spanish to Spanish. That's good. Sorry, short circuit. Basically, the first part of the response is they're working at different scales and in different ambits, and the jurisdictional approaches bring together potentially the private sector, public sector, and communities to deal with things that can address large scale and policy drivers. An example of this is an experience in Mexico where a negotiation with the World Bank ultimately didn't move forward, but it did lead to policy change around safeguards in the country, around forest communities.
La ventaja de un proyecto individual, por ejemplo, a nivel del mercado voluntario, es que la comunidad tiene la certeza de que sus esfuerzos van a ser debidamente recompensados, por decirlo de alguna manera.
The advantage of an individual project is that the community that's involved has greater certainty that they're going to see their individual efforts more directly recognized and compensated.
Lo cual en algún escenario jurisdiccional podría de pronto diluirse, ¿no?
And in a jurisdictional context, that may become more diffuse, be diluted.
Por otra parte, puede haber entornos no favorables a los derechos en algunos países donde las iniciativas jurisdiccionales tal vez no sean tan atractivas.
There may be also circumstances where the policy and political framework isn't favorable to community interests and rights in certain countries where a jurisdictional approach may run into trouble.
Entonces a mí me parece que son dos vías que pueden ser complementarias y que no hay, digamos, una fórmula que aplique en todos los países. Me parece que es bueno que tengamos estas dos alternativas que pueden ser complementarias incluso en un mismo territorio.
So these are two different approaches that may not be applicable across all countries, and it's useful to have them as being complementary, even within the same country and within the same jurisdiction.
Seguramente Lucía puede comentar también de eso.
And yeah, no, I completely agree with Gustavo and all he said. I just want to say that, of course, jurisdictional has the purpose of raising ambition. Like, as you know, like a country cannot get jurisdictional credits unless the deforestation of the whole country was reduced compared to the previous years in the baseline. So that means that even if some regions are doing good, if the whole country is not changing the trend, they will not get credits. That, of course, raises ambition because and makes us go faster, because it is difficult to actually get to that point one project at a time, right? However, of course, at the same time, this is the other situation is there are some areas that are doing great efforts in these countries that are not reducing their deforestation, and they need like a pathway to start getting there. And projects get a pathway for that, even in countries that are not reducing their deforestation, but that does not mean we shouldn't be ambitious to get those countries to that place. So that's like ambitious and how fast we want to reduce deforestation and what scale of finance we really need to incentivize this. Gustavo already said the first deal Guyana closed was $750 million deal, which is actually it is a part of their LP, GDP, is that in English? Yeah, other GDP, right? We're talking about something that can actually change and help change policies and help change things that only governments can do. Only governments can improve land titling for indigenous communities. Only governments can do enforce certain laws that are needed against these very powerful forces that are generating deforestation. So that's why we need that. At the same time, not all communities can have a project. No, I think like we've worked together a lot with Mexican communities. Some of them have characteristics to actually develop a project, but many indigenous organizations don't have those characteristics. And jurisdictional REDD Plus gives a path to those other communities that would never become a project to be part of something and to benefit from that collective initiative. So yeah, no, I just wanted to add that for jurisdictional. But with this, I'm not trying to say that jurisdictional is the only goal. What I'm trying to say is that's why jurisdictional is created. At the same time, these other local efforts have been very valuable, and we should keep them, improve them as a way to add up to the whole ambition.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lucia. Julia.
Can I just
of course, passing to you, and then I'm still curious, Colin, to give us the final word, the reality check of this whole, nesting landscape, and how do we move from bottom to top and top to bottom. But Julia, you go.
From bottom to top and top to bottom. No, I just wanted to echo what you both said, which is that we believe both are very clearly needed. They operate at two different scales, and so they address the drivers that are relevant at those two different scales. And so we see jurisdictional and project level as complementary, as mutually reinforcing, and done right, we leverage the strength of each for what the scale of what they address is. Our vision is to align, what's important for them to work together is to align the methodologies and to align at the national baseline, the national data sets. And I think if we can get there, which will be a journey together, but aligning the methodology and aligning the national data, then we're really in a place where the accounting is aligned and you can get the best of both worlds.
Wonderful. Colin, let me try to rephrase the question for you. Well, I guess you've explained it so very well. We need both, and in the meantime, we need also confidence in what we're doing, create trust in this market, make buyers actually understand that both has value, both is needed, and both has the pathway. We have a very loud boy group over there. I don't know if we can do anything about them, but so as we work with sort of towards that full convergence and alignment, Colin, as somebody who needs to make stuff happen on the ground, get money in, drive activities forward, what is your sense? Give us a pulse check of what is a timeline for Cambodia or other countries you're in where you see that convergence sort of coming out. The institutions that need to be built that we heard from Francisca comment on, what is your sense in terms of time or obstacles? How easy will that be or how hard?
So I think this is definitely going to be a process, and it also, again, I made the point earlier. I think it also depends on some of the starting point and the strength of some of those existing institutions and government structures and whether they exist and how quickly you can kind of really build out a program. So it may be that in some places this is about starting with the smaller steps of just aligning accounting between projects and national, and that's the starting point. And even that might take years. Whether a government wants to align. Governments have their data. They have their data sets. They have what they're reporting to the UNFCCC on, and those are important data sets. Whether those satisfy the requirements of the standard or not is something different. The cycles with which when governments will update those, when that happens, and whether that would then align with kind of future requirements of a standard, that might be cycles of 3, 6, 10 years. So that's even just on the accounting. And then building up the programs and the institutional capacities, the decision making, as I mentioned earlier, how and whether all of this aligns with the NDCs and potential Article 6 decision making. That's a whole other, pathway of institution building and decision making and whatnot. So, I really think that I believe in that final state of total alignment and strong projects that deliver localized benefits, coupled with all of the policy decision making that needs to happen for us to have the scale and ambition and reduce some of those drivers. But frankly, I see this as a 10, 15-year journey. Again, starting in the starting point. So I know there's a strong demand for this in the market. It's seen as signs of integrity, and that's where we want to go. But in order for these countries to continue to receive finance, buyers are going to have to, I think, have an appetite that this is going to be a journey. It's going to take time. But the scale of deforestation, the threats we're seeing in some of these places, I don't think it can't be a waiting game. Finance needs to continue to flow. It needs to continue to scale. And people need to be comfortable with the degree of process before we get to that idealized final endpoint.
Thank you, Colin. I feel that was a very good closing remark here. We need finance to flow now, and we need the trust that we're going to get it right. But it's a journey. It's a journey and a collaboration between a lot of actors. And it was my real pleasure to have such a diverse panel here. Two standards that are about to marry somewhere at some location, hopefully in the not too distant future, and trying to figure out how that is going to work. Lucia, you don't have a nested project yet, right? Is there a project already, like where the accounting is? Anyways, is that?
We have projects, like we have jurisdictional programs, and as Gustavo said, the only jurisdictional program that has issued credits is Guyana's.
Right.
However, we have 18 participants, and most of our jurisdictions have projects. So even if the first issuance was in a country that does not, many of our participants have projects. So yes, like most of them are going through these discussions on how to nest them.
Wonderful. Well, there's a lot to sort out. We have 5 minutes left. I wonder, is anybody inclined to do some more final remarks? Gustavo, would you like to say something? Or are we, any more questions? If not, I'll give you 5 minutes of your time back at the Visicop.
Pues yo lo que animaría, Ana, es a que sigamos tratando de construir estos espacios con diálogos multiactor y que salgamos un poco de nuestra cámara de eco para poder construir puentes y acuerdos.
I would just encourage us to continue to create these spaces for dialogue among multiple stakeholders and take us all out of our echo chambers.
Perfect. Give the hand up to the friends together. Fascinating panel. Thank you, everybody, and thank you to the panelists. That was fantastic.